Hi, I'm Maggie.
And I'm Marin, and you're listening to
Girlhood Movie Database,
a podcast where we deconstruct and muse on depictions of girlhood in film, literature, and other media.
a feminist celebration of pop culture, the audacity of youth, and the ways we grow away from and into our bodies, beliefs, and dreams for ourselves and each other.
And today we are discussing
Hedda.
so delicious.
Yeah, it was a fun watch.
The movie is delicious, but just that name is delicious to say. Hedda.
Yeah.
Every time they said it to her in the movie and everyone has a British accent, or I guess Nina Haas has a German accent, it made me wish I was named Hedda. Like, I want people that call me this in this tone. Anyway, maybe that's a weird thing to say considering this character.
I mean, she's very strong-willed and fascinating.
She's so fascinating. She's so fascinating. Yes, we are discussing Hedda today, which is a adaptation of the Henrik Ibsen play, Hedda Gabler, a Norwegian play from the 19th century. This adaptation is directed and written by DaCosta, who is directing the upcoming 28 Years Later sequel, 28 Years Later Bone Temple, which I am very excited for. Maggie, are you excited for that?
I am. I love the most recent 28 Years Later.
We do. We've talked about that.
Yeah.
And I think it's cool that she's directing the next one. She also directed the reboot legacy sequel Candyman movie, which I never watched. But she's been working for a while, so this is exciting for her. This movie premiered at TIFF in September 7th, 2025, so it's a very recent release. And then it had a very, very limited theatrical run, October 22nd, and was unceremoniously plopped onto Amazon Prime Video on October 29th. The tagline for this movie is, "A little chaos is good for the gathering."
Like, what does that even mean? I love it. A little chaos is good for the gathering.
It
like, I
means
get
exactly
it.
what it's saying.
Right. Yeah. Like, there's like a sparseness to it.
Mm-hmm.
It's not trying to explain things to us like we're idiots. I love that.
It builds intrigue.
Yeah.
Rather than misrepresenting what the movie is. And now having seen the movie, I can just envision Tessa Thompson saying that to someone.
Yeah.
So in hindsight, it fits really well too.
Yeah. I think it's my favorite tagline that we've had.
It's a good one.
Yeah.
It's really good. This movie's really good, by the way. I guess you could have gleaned that when I called it delicious 2 seconds after Maggie said its name. Maggie, could you read the log line for us?
From DaCosta comes a provocative modern reimagining of Henrik Ibsen's classic play, Hedda. Tessa Thompson, in parentheses, finds herself torn between the lingering ache of a past love and the quiet suffocation of her present life. Over the course of one charged night, long repressed desires and hidden tensions erupt, pulling her and everyone around her into a spiral of manipulation, passion, and betrayal. I don't know. I like that too.
I like it too. I'm not quite sure about she finds herself torn between the lingering ache of a past love and the quiet suffocation of her present life, because she's just more chaotic as a woman than any possible binary that could exist. There is past love and there is the suffocation of her present life. But I think what she wants and is trying to accomplish is much more nebulous than choosing between those two things. But I understand why it's presented that way, to try to get someone to watch it.
Yeah. It makes sense as a brief synopsis. I like the adjective charged. One charged night, because it connotes something electric and Hedda is this sort of electricity that is charging all of this chaos. So I just appreciated that phrase specifically.
It's good. I'm trying to think if we should run down what happens in this story. Because we meet a woman named Hedda, right? She's married, who's played by Tessa Thompson, who's just luminous. I have enjoyed her work for a long time. She is married to this guy who is an aspiring professor, and they have just come back from their 6-month-long honeymoon. If I had to be on a trip for that long, I would also be deeply unhappy in my life. Just saying. I love my partner so much, but if I had to spend 6 months on a trip with him, no wonder this marriage was doomed to fail. Am I crazy for reacting that way?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I would love it. But, and TJ and I, like our relationship, my partner and I, like our relationship started on a very long trip.
That's true. I also notoriously hate traveling though.
Yeah.
So I might be an outlier here. But when one of them mentioned that their honeymoon was 6 months long, I was like, well, no wonder she fucking hates you.
Well, and part of that too, like her negative feelings about it is related to the fact that he used it as an opportunity to research and work. So they weren't really on a honeymoon.
He worked all day and then probably came home with the expectation that she would just have sex with him.
Yeah. Or maybe not even. His character seems like he would be so distracted by his work that actually intimacy is something that he would see as a distraction.
Perhaps.
And she sees his work as a distraction from the intimacy. Although she's more complicated than that, for sure.
But immediately, it's clear to me, y'all not compatible. Sorry. So yes, they're back from their 6-month honeymoon. They have bought this lavish house that they can't afford. And they are hoping that he gets the professorship that he wants so they can pay off their debts for this house and live the high society lifestyle that they are accustomed to living. And so part of that is that they are throwing this big party to appease the person who is potentially going to offer him this position and his potential future colleagues. And also Hedda is a socialite, basically. So that is what is expected of her, is to throw these parties. And so they're throwing this party, lots of drinking, people are doing cocaine. It's the 50s, I glean, 1950s. And it's very obvious that Hedda is super unhappy in her life, unfulfilled. Her default mode in a lot of ways, I think, is cunning and cruelty, simply because that's a way for her to exercise control in a world that doesn't afford her a lot of control or power. Main gist of it is that Hedda's former lover, played by Nina Hoss, Eileen Loveborg, who is also a professor, shows up at this party. And it becomes, like the logline said, a tension between the past and the present and the future. And there's alcohol, there's drugs, there's sexual intrigue. Shit goes off the rails. I guess we'll get into more plot specifics later. But does that lay the groundwork well enough, do you think?
Yeah, I think so.
And it should be noted that in the original play, the Eileen Loveborg character is a man, not a woman. Mm-hmm. So the queerness is an element that DaCosta has added in her rendering. And Tessa Thompson is a Black actress, so the character of Hedda is Black, existing and navigating in what seems like predominantly white world based on the people in this movie. So that's also a sociological element that's not necessarily present in the play that is present here.
When you told me that it's like a reimagining, of Hedda and its maid queer. I thought that the queer element was going to be Hedda having a relationship with what's
Thea?
Eileen? Thea,
who is Eileen's new lover.
yes,
Okay.
yes,
Who is also at this party.
yeah.
And so Hedda's jealous. And
So like Loveborg's like mistress basically is who I thought that based on the play.
Mm-hmm.
So making Loveborg though a woman was like much more interesting. It's a great reimagining. Yeah. That's all I wanted to say.
Awesome.
So I was already surprised by that dynamic because I didn't watch the preview. I knew nothing. I didn't see a trailer or anything. I just went into it.
I just knew about this movie because I follow all the film festivals. That's my hobby. So I knew that it was coming out and I was like, oh, that's really, and I knew that I knew the cast and who the director was. And so I was like, oh, this is really interesting. And I had read Hedda Gabler when I was in college, but I have no memory of the impression I had of it then. But I did end up rereading it before I watched the movie, so it was fresher in my brain. And obviously reading a play on the page, you're at a disservice already because it's designed to be acted. So the character of Hedda really does gain a lot of her complexity when you're watching a person portray her as opposed to just reading her dialogue on this page. But I think what strikes me now about the play, which you also read or listened to for this conversation, correct?
Mm-hmm.
I think what strikes me now about the play and understanding why it has lasted and why it was so controversial when it was first performed in the 19th century is that I do think the play is just asking you to understand this woman who is so contradictory and cruel and challenging and fascinating. It's asking you to hold all those things about her at the same time.
And I think the word understand is really important here because I agree. I think that we are being asked to understand the character of Hedda, but it could be easy to conflate that with we're being asked to empathize with her or give her grace. And I don't think that we are. We're just being asked to understand why she would make these decisions, even though we know they're horrible. She kind of sucks.
She does things that I would say I would feel comfortable calling evil.
Yes. Yeah.
Because a big aspect of the Eileen Loveborg character, her former lover, is that she is an alcoholic who is newly sober. And she comes to this party. She's very clear about the fact that she doesn't want to drink, that her drinking has hindered her career. She is trying really hard to rehabilitate herself. She has just published this new book. She wants to be a respected professor in a profession where she's already one of the few women there. And Hedda is immediately goading her into drinking and acting like her not drinking makes her look weak in front of these men and is a deficit to her character. And I would argue that is an evil thing to do. Yet, I also understand the ways in which Hedda is a victim of oppression and hypocritical standards. But also, she makes other people her victims at the same time. And I like that we are just asked to sit with that and be entertained by it. And I don't mean to sound dismissive, but there's no attempt to rehabilitate her necessarily.
I don't have anything to add to that. I just agree with it. We are just being asked to be entertained.
I think, because I was thinking about this specifically in relation to the changes DaCosta has made to the play in adding this element of queerness and making Hedda a woman of color, which is something that does get discussed in the movie. At one point, Eileen is like, you you could have been on the same track I was. You could have been this great thinker. You could have, been a professor. And Hedda makes a comment about first the number of women who are allowed to have those kinds of jobs. And she's like, and I'm sure they are all white as well. So the movie is acknowledging that, which I wasn't sure if it was going to, or if it was just sort of trying to be a race blind reimagining of the play, but I appreciated the fact that it actually took Hedda's race into account and they openly discussed how that's factoring into everything. But what was the point I was going to make? Oh, that when you're adding these other elements to Hedda's identity, by which she is oppressed in the society she is living in, she is oppressed as a queer person. She is oppressed as a Black woman in this predominantly white high society. That those things are not then exploited to try to make us feel sympathy for her in such a way that we are meant to overlook the cruel and evil things she does as well. Does that make sense?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And when I was thinking about how just entertaining this movie is and how delighted I was in just watching Tessa Thompson say these things to people and sow chaos all around her, I thought about this, I don't know if you call it a trend, but this emergence of quote unquote bad women in film, specifically in the 21st century, and the way it feels like we culturally respond to that. And I'm wondering if this started with Gone Girl. Have you seen Gone Girl or read it?
I think I've seen it, but I don't know if I can remember who's in it.
Ben Affleck and Rosamund Pike.
I don't know.
It's really good. I rewatched it last year. It's a great movie. But I think the thing about that movie is that the main female character, Amy, played by Rosamund Pike, is a cruel, bad person. But she has also been cruelly treated by her husband at the same time. So she's occupying a space that I think is like similar to Hedda in that way, where she is a victim to the like patriarchy and these things, but then she also victimizes others. She literally kills people. Okay. But there's this response to her that I guess maybe this is me showing a shade of chronically online, but you go on the internet and people are like, she did nothing wrong. I support women's rights and wrongs. You have people talking in that vein about her. That's really interesting to me because I'm wondering why that is. And I wonder if people, and women specifically, are uncomfortable about enjoying the entertainment that comes with watching a bad woman on screen. That we feel like we have to make her some kind of hero or idolize her in some way in order for us to feel okay about enjoying it. Mm. And I feel like this movie, it could have been really easy to try to girl bossify Hedda, but it doesn't. And I think it's just asking us to be entertained by her. And we can consider why that is, but the movie's not trying to indict us for enjoying it. And I don't think Gone Girl is trying to indict you for potentially enjoying it either. But that woman, Amy Dunn, is a psychopath. Her husband's also a shitbag. And it's entertaining to watch them destroy each other.
Yeah. I think I have several thoughts. I'm trying to think of where to start.
Sorry.
No, it's good. I think that, well, first of all, Tessman,
Hedda's husband.
Yes. So I listened to the play. And I think that the voice actor's interpretation of Tessman really influenced how I see his characterization, because specifically in the audio of the play that I listened to, Tessman was rather spineless and very aloof to everything that's happening that isn't happening in whatever book he's reading. And the Tessman of this film, I felt like, was not nearly as spineless. And so I see him as less of a victim in the film than I do in the play. And maybe that's true in general. Maybe in general, the play just makes him less aware. I still see him as a victim of Hedda more than I see him as like a shitbag, as you say. Like, I actually don't think he is. I don't hate him.
Well, to be clear, I was calling Ben Affleck and Gone Girl a shitbag, not.
Oh, okay. I was like, I think
No.
Tessman is kind of
No, I don't
a
think
victim.
I don't think he's shitbag.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, it's
Sorry.
okay.
I misunderstood that.
Ben Affleck, he is technically a victim also in Gone Girl, but he was a shitbag too.
I feel like I've seen it at some point, but like I cannot remember. But also, I really don't like Ben Affleck.
We've talked about this.
Yes.
I have a higher tolerance for him.
Yeah.
I think Gone Girl is one of the best uses of his public persona in a lot of ways, because he comes off, I think, in public, not necessarily as a shitbag, but just kind of clueless and weak-willed, perhaps. It works. It's really good casting, I think.
Okay. I'm gonna watch it now, or rewatch it.
You see him be terrorized,
Mm.
if that is of interest to you.
It is. I'm interested to speak.
So
Okay. Maybe we can take that part out, because sorry, I just misunderstood.
Well, I'm still interested in what you're saying though about Tessman being a victim
Mm.
to Hedda.
Yeah. So Hedda is willing to victimize anybody to get what she wants. And so the internet argument, though, of like, I support women's rights and wrongs, which, you know, I can appreciate like the comedic factor of that. Yeah, women can do quote unquote wrong things that I'm like, I support this, because why is it wrong? Right. But Hedda very clearly is just being evil, like you said, and she's hurting other women. Okay, I feel like this is also related back to Little Women, because I couldn't forgive Amy.
Mm-hmm. There's a burnt manuscript in this movie as well
for getting rid of Joe's manuscript, throwing it in the fucking fire. And what does Hedda do? And there's even more at stake here. Hedda steals and burns Eileen's manuscript. And it, like, her career was riding on that manuscript, her reputation, and she had to fight so hard to have any kind of standing, not only as a woman, but as a lesbian. And she fucking burned it. I mean,
and then encouraged her after she plays dumb and is like, oh, we can't find the manuscript. She acts like she cares about finding the manuscript when she stole it and burned it. And then she encourages Eileen to kill herself and hands her a gun just to add to the evilness.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, I mean, yeah, I don't have sympathy for Hedda. I can understand. This goes back to what you said too. Like, I can understand why she acts the way that she does. She's protecting her wealth, her safety, her social safety. But also, she didn't have to do all that. You know what I mean? She did not have to do all that to protect herself.
Yeah. I think we should maybe explain how we're understanding her. Just because I feel like you and I are probably assuming we're understanding her one way, but people listening are like, what the fuck are they talking about? And so, like, what I understand about Hedda is that Well, okay. When I read Ibsen's play, the impression I get is that he is perhaps trying to explore mental illness in a way, in an era when we didn't know a lot about it. Because I look at Hedda and I look at the way she's behaving, and I'm like, this is a woman who is so profoundly unhappy, and she's incapable of being happy or satisfied. And I can only look at that as some kind of mental ailment. I'm like, if maybe you were on a mood stabilizer and in talk therapy, maybe you could have been helped. Do you get where I'm coming from?
Mm-hmm.
But in the world that she is in, she is expected to adhere to these certain conventions because she's a woman. And she clearly disdains those conventions. I don't think she wants to just be throwing parties all the time and entertaining people and being pretty, for the sake of others' enjoyment. And all she has is her money then. And she doesn't have the courage to run off with her female lover and live the life of an intellectual, because in doing that, she would have to forfeit her financial security. But to be a woman, to especially be a woman in a lesbian relationship, a lesbian interracial relationship in the 1950s without financial security is a huge risk. So she's sort of just always between a rock and a hard place. And I think she's mentally ill on top of it. So when I say I understand why she's making these choices, that is why. Because I think in her heart, she knows that running off with Eileen and living that life would maybe be the truest shot she has at happiness. But she made the decision to marry someone else. She made the decision to not live the life of a middle-class intellectual. But now her lover has a new lover and is accomplishing her own dreams and is working to better herself and be taken seriously. So why not try to sabotage her life? Because that's the life I didn't have the courage to have. Can't say any of that is right, but I understand why she's doing it.
Yeah.
So when I say understand her, that's the kind of thing I'm talking about.
No, thank you for articulating all that. And I'm glad you brought up you just using the term middle class, I feel like is inserting this conversation around wealth, which I think is really important to the understanding of Hedda and also just of what makes this a good narrative and an interesting narrative. Actually, before I talk about wealth, I want to talk about race and go back to that, because thinking about her as someone who is mentally ill, and I wonder if in the film, right, because we have this added element of her being one of very few people of color in this white, wealthy space, and how that would impact her health and specifically her mental health. And it made me think of this statistic about how college-educated Black women are actually more likely to experience complications in childbirth and like have poor health outcomes in general than Black women with lower levels of education. And it's understood that it's likely because of the years of stress of experiencing racism in academia and in those spaces.
That makes sense.
And what that does to your brain, to your body, to your mind, to your spirit, right? And I think that potentially you could easily argue that we're seeing Hedda experience that, where I actually don't know what her education is, but when Eileen says to her, you could have been a professor, you could have done this. She's obviously very intelligent. She social engineers the shit out of everyone around her in really subtle ways. And she knows that she wouldn't be able to do that. But even though she wasn't in academia, she's still in these white spaces where she's constantly facing racism.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, just the stress of that. And I thought about that because Hedda is pregnant. Or at least she says she is.
She says she is.
Honestly.
I honestly don't. Because that's what's so fascinating about her as a character is we can infer that she burns this manuscript of Eileen's out of jealousy and sabotage and a desire to sabotage Eileen's future happiness with Thea and in her profession, right? But then when her husband finds out that she burned the manuscript, Hedda tells him, I did this for us to ensure that you could get the job that you and Eileen are competing for.
She's not wrong, though.
And she's not wrong. But in her heart, does she actually believe that? I don't fucking think so.
I don't think she even cares.
And then she goes on to say, and when I say us, and she puts her hands on her stomach, I genuinely don't know if that was just a play to get him on her side, or if she actually is pregnant, and maybe that's also part of what's contributing to her mental decline. Because in the play, it's definitely alluded to that people are wondering when she's going to become a mother. But she doesn't make that same comment to her husband, I believe. Or does she?
I don't remember. I do know that it's alluded to, like people noticing.
They comment
like
on her figure,
body. Yeah.
And that she will eventually have other things to keep her busy.
Right.
So the pressure of being a mother is definitely articulated in the play. And in the movie, someone else asks her about like being a mom or being pregnant, and she says that she never wants, like, she's like, no, I would be a terrible mother. So when she, at the end of the movie, when she tells her husband that she's pregnant, I genuinely don't know if she is or not.
Yeah.
Because we also know that she's suicidal, too. At the beginning of the movie, before this party even starts, she is by this lake, and is she in the lake, or is she just near it?
I can't remember.
But her husband is calling for her, and we see her take rocks out of her pockets. She's in this coat, and we see her take rocks out of her pockets. So I'm like, oh, okay. We, right off the bat, suicidal ideation at the very least. And then the movie ends with her putting the rocks back in her pockets and walking into the lake. And it's the same, it's a mirror image. Her husband is calling for her, and the film cuts to black right as the top of her head is still out of the water, but the rest of her body's in the water. So we don't know if she gets out of the water or not. In the play, she does. It ends with her killing herself. That's worth noting. Where was I going to go with all this? You're talking about her being pregnant and whether or not I actually think she is. Maybe that was all I wanted to say, was just that I'm not sure if she actually is. And I don't think we're supposed to be sure.
Yeah. Although in the play, I felt sure that she was. I think that we know that she is in the play. Yeah, but in this film, I'm like...
Because she's just doing so much double crossing and...
Yeah.
And that's another thing when I say I understand her. There is logic to her and the choices she's making, but then there also isn't at the same time. She just is manipulating however she needs to in any given moment in order to get what she needs in that moment or get out of the current situation she's in. She's not thinking long term all the time, I think. And so it's fun to watch, to be like, okay, how's she going to get out of this? And then she does.
I mean, I do think like things that she's doing are evil. I don't think she gave a fuck whether or not Tessman actually got the professorship because, like you said, I don't think she has this like sort of long term.
I think long term, she just wants to kill herself.
Agreed. I think that she's doing a lot of this to entertain herself because she's bored, because she is capable of the kind of success Eileen has experienced intellectually, but she knows she will never have the opportunity. And so where does she turn that brilliance? Instead of turning it into academia, she turns it to manipulating everyone around her.
Psychological warfare at dinner parties.
Yes. And I'm like, I fucking get that. I get it.
The other thing I wanted to say, piggybacking off what you were saying about race, is it's mentioned in this movie, which is not part of the original text, that she's a bastard and that her wealth comes from her father. It's never specified what the race of her father is, what the race of her mother is, but I think the aspect of her like being a child born out of wedlock is interesting, and I think it's not implausible to wonder if maybe she is mixed race, if Hedda is mixed race. Maybe her father was white and her mother wasn't, and how her father's wealth that she has inherited is what allows her to enter this world of high society. And that is like the thing that is keeping her there, because her race and her sexuality are things that threaten her stability in that world. So that also just makes it make sense why she wouldn't want to take this risk to become a middle class intellectual in an interracial lesbian relationship.
I had not thought of that. I think that makes a lot of sense because they kind of make it's brought up on more than one occasion that she's a bastard child.
Right.
And it's something that they use against her. It's said with malice. And it makes sense that it's actually a racialized insult.
Yeah.
Because I took note, I was like, why do they care so much? And I get like it was the 50s, whatever. The time period. Who's fucking calling people bastard children? Nobody's fucking doing that. Well, I'm sure people are, but generally speaking, that's not a criticism we make, right? But then it would make more sense. But it was, yeah, I think it is potentially like just a racialized term, which is also a tool of white supremacy, which is like say shit like that and be like, I didn't say anything about race, but you know that it's fueled by racism.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that you're spot on.
What did you want to say about middle class stuff?
Well, this is what, so I told Marin before this, I need to continue our conversation about Kim Kardashian from the previous episode. So I watched All's Fair. I've watched that show that we mentioned in the last episode, the Ryan Murphy fucking shit show where there are Kim Kardashian, Glenn Close, Niecy Nash, and Naomi Watts.
And Sarah Paulson.
But like minus Sarah Paulson, because part of like the premise is that the first four women I named, like they have their firm, and then Sarah Paulson was kind of left out of it.
Oh, okay.
And so she's their antagonist.
I still haven't watched this show and never will.
That's fine.
So I'm relying on Maggie to.
So y'all know how I feel about Ryan Murphy, which is thumbs down, 2 thumbs down. So since I've watched it, I'm like, man, this is like bad. I mean, Kim Kardashian's performance is super flat, in part because she doesn't have control over the small muscles in her face. And I'm not even saying that as a critique purposely anyway. It's just the truth. So her, like when she's trying to show emotion, she'll just like close her eyes. It's a lot of just like closing her eyes and looking down and then looking up. The sex scenes are not good. None of them are interesting. Sarah Paulson has these like fucking crazy lines that are meant, I think, to be so shocking. They're funny. They're just super crass. And I don't care about it though. It's not interesting. I am not actually interested in these women's lives. Why? Because they're all just fucking rich. They're so rich. And they try to give them these backstories, but I still don't care about them because they have like this astronomical wealth now that I'm like, okay, cool. You worked hard. It's very much this, oh, but like we had to work so hard to get to where we are. And we started this firm and this is feminism. And I'm like, no, this is capitalism, you know? And how are we conflating this still? And it's frustrating. I don't know why I said still. Like, it's never not been conflated before because, like, white women feminism specifically. This actually annoyed me almost more than anything else. And it's arguably one of the less egregiously stupid things about this show. But I have to talk about it because it annoyed me. So Naomi Watts, I think in the show she's like British, which I think she lived in Australia as like a teenager
Right.
or moved there, but I think maybe she was born in the UK.
Yeah, her accent has always been.
Yeah, I'm not entirely.
She's like Australian, but also Welsh, I think.
And so she in the show, that's like a part of her character, is that she's like not American, and they like make fun of her for being British. At one point, Sarah Paulson's character says something about like tea and crumpets or some stupid thing like that. Anyway, at one point, she's like, oh, well, I tried to call Glenn Close's character and, you know, she didn't answer me. This side plot that's supposed to be quite important is that Naomi Watts' character is really struggling with being left out of this quote unquote American sisterhood that the other women have. And I'm like, what? I'm supposed to care? You being left out about, first of all.
So do they have a group where they meet once a week and it's called the American Girl Boss Sisterhood Lawyer Diva Off? Like what?
No, she just feels like she's not as included.
She just feels like an outsider.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which, okay, I can understand. I guess I lived in New Zealand for a little bit, but like I didn't like build a career where I became super wealthy. You know what I mean? I'm not saying that there aren't elements of feeling like an outsider that I'm sure she's experiencing, but oh, man, they're just like so rich. I'm like, really? You know what? If you feel like you're left out, go make other friends. I don't know. It's ridiculous. It's very silly to me.
That does seem silly. It just seems boring.
It's boring. Exactly. It's really boring. And it's, as I was watching this, I'm like, it just feels like a bunch of really rich people got together. They just like wanted to make a show. And they've all been rich for so long, even if they haven't been rich forever, that they're just like too out of touch. And so everything just feels very like sterile and insular and therefore uninteresting. And it wasn't until like episode 7 where I watched some of the credits where it listed all the executive producers. And there are so many, like all of the women that I already mentioned, they're all executive producers. Also, you know, Ryan Murphy, of course, and Kris Jenner. So this literally was a bunch of already rich, already famous celebrities got together and produced this show. And so, yeah, it is out of touch and insular. So I watched this when I had the flu. It's why I ended up
to mention.
Yeah. Because I couldn't watch anything I actually was interested in. I was too sick to really pay attention. So I watched this, and I also watched We Were Liars.
I haven't watched that, but I know what happens in it.
It's so insane. It's so stupid, I think, personally. Like,
I never read the book either, which was a big deal.
But it's also like a YA. Like, I understand.
But the twist is so dumb.
It's the twist. The twist is absolutely. I was like, what the fuck? You know,
What's
because I'm like
the twist for We Were Liars, and you'll be like, what?
I'm literally feverish as I'm watching this, and I'm like, am I fucking hallucinating right now? This is seriously What?
I'm pretty sure they've greenlit a second season for that show,
They have.
which it was a standalone novel. As far as I know, the first season covered. So what?
I don't know. What are they
She's
going to
make new friends? What?
Yeah. So I watched those side by side. Okay.
Amazing.
And it got me thinking. I'm like, okay, who is this? This shit is marketed towards young women. I think All's Fair, the target demographic is probably like a little older too. I think it has like a broader range than We Were Liars. But I mean, whatever. I'm 37. I'm watching We Were Liars too.
I am a staunch teen TV advocate.
So I think women in general, I started thinking about comparing what the YA shows look like now to the like YA shows of my youth where the target demographic was young women. So thinking about Buffy, Felicity, Dawson's Creek, Charmed, right? And
My So-Called Life. Did you watch that?
Yes. Yeah. Well, Claire Danes, right? And something that made them so relatable to so many of us is because they were depicting the lives of middle-class girls. In We Were Liars, this girl is part of a family that owns an entire island. And then her mom and her mom's sisters have their own like mansions on this island, and everyone's just super fucking rich. And in All's Fair too, everybody is super fucking rich. And I started thinking about how I think some of the moral decay of entertainment and media is related to the centralization of who owns that media and then who has the money to produce media in the United States, because it's not something that's funded. So if you want to make art here, you have to like be able to self-fund.
Right.
And
we're recording this like a week after Netflix has decided to buy Warner Brothers. That Paramount Skydance merger now is old news, but it's very bad. And in the US, we don't have like national film lottery funding where the government sets aside money for film that directors can then apply for some of that money. That's very common in other countries. So yeah, to contextualize the things Maggie is saying.
yeah, no, thank you for that. Yes, because that was in my mind as well.
And Amazon owns MGM, which was a major American film studio, which is why Hedda just gets dumped on streaming unceremoniously and doesn't get a proper theatrical run anymore.
I said moral decay, and I didn't necessarily, I just mean quality too. But I think maybe I didn't misspeak because there's this element of an understanding that having a lot of wealth and a lot of power leads to, or can lead to, a sense of elitism and dismissiveness for the working class, which I think is pretty fucking basic understanding of being a human and trying to live a life. And my prediction is we are just going to start getting more and more bullshit shows about really, really rich people living their rich lives without any critique of what that actually means.
Or at least investigation into the implications of that.
Yes. So what was refreshing after watching these absolute literal shit shows, watching Hedda investigate these questions around wealth and power and who gets to have that power and who gets to dictate what is morally right and wrong was just really refreshing. And I am afraid that we are going to see that less and less. I think that we already are. I would argue that we already are.
I guess a half glass full approach would be, I mean, you're right that about the implications of these corporate mergers and streaming slop and all that. I think you're 100% on the nose. I think I still have faith though, because I know the kinds of movies that the independent film scene in this country is still producing. I know there are a lot of very successful creative people who have integrity when it comes to the kind of work they want to make. So I have faith that these things can, that good art will continue to exist. But I do fear that it will be harder and harder for the general populace to access it. Especially when a lot of people are watching shows and films primarily through streamers, which are so algorithmically controlled and which produce and fund and greenlight a lot of bad stuff as opposed to good stuff. So I don't totally despair yet, but I understand the leaning towards despair.
Yeah. And I would say I feel more rage than despair. And it's because I absolutely, like, good art is still like going to be made. My anger is that the dissemination of that art is just going to become increasingly more challenging. And like you said, it comes down to accessibility. Who gets to access this quote unquote good art that's being made? And it's going to be fewer and fewer people.
Right.
So we'll have to just be more intentional about seeking out independently made films.
Yeah. Or at least
in media.
Yeah. And, you know, there are still studio films that have shit to say. I'm not acting like there aren't. But if Netflix buys Warner Brothers, would I have been able to see One Battle After Another, which is a movie about fighting white supremacists, in theaters? Maybe not. You know, I don't know. So stay tuned for that. But as far as the investigation into class that you were so pleased to see in Hedda goes, is there anything else you wanted to say?
My last comment would be regarding something you said before we started recording, where you brought up Saltburn. And maybe
I did.
And because
a movie people are very normal about on the internet.
I quite like Saltburn. And I think that Saltburn is operating in a lot of the same ways that Hedda is, in that we are being entertained and we are being asked to understand the protagonist, even though the protagonist is doing horrible things. And maybe Saltburn is using more of like a shock value for sure.
Yeah.
To get to that point. But it's still, in its own way, is investigating. I don't even know if it's necessarily like an investigation of.
I don't know. I don't think it is.
I think that it is critiquing this idea of old money and the wealth gap and what do you get to own and what kind of power do you get to have. I don't think it's that interested in being like, let's have a whole conversation about it, which I quite like. It's something that I like about Saltburn. I think that it's just being like, listen, these people are shitbags, but then you can also be an asshole, and that's living. And I just get to be entertained watching it. So I think what I like about Saltburn is similar to the things that I like about Hedda, although I think Hedda is actually like investigating those questions in a way that Saltburn necessarily is not.
Here's my thing with Saltburn. I actually don't have a lot of opinions about how Saltburn is or isn't investigating class. I think a lot of people's outrage with that movie is that they thought it was trying to be too sympathetic towards the ultra wealthy by making the middle class interloper the villain who destroys their lives. And people were acting like Emerald Fennell is this evil bourgeois aristocrat.
Wait, why were they mad that the middle class interloper was ruining their life?
They felt like because the character who destroys the family in Saltburn is the middle class kid outsider who shows up.
That's the plot.
That they felt this is what, and I'm talking about people who have shit media literacy. Okay.
I'm confused. I need you to explain this.
Okay. So the plot of Saltburn. Barry Keoghan plays like a middle class kid who's very much an outsider at Oxford. He meets Jacob Elordi, who's from this really rich family that owns this Saltburn estate, castle, whatever the fuck. He weasels his way into Jacob Elordi's social circle, fabricates this lie about his parents being dead, right? And then once he gets invited in this house, he just either kills or drives people insane so that the movie ends with him inheriting everything and this family has been destroyed. Right. That's the general plot of Saltburn, correct? Am I correct?
Yeah.
Okay. So this was a real thing that people in mass were upset about. And again, this is me showing my chronically online.
I love it.
Side. I don't agree with this take, but people felt like by having the plot follow that trajectory, it's trying to make a statement. It's trying to humanize the upper class, the aristocratic class, to an unethical degree, and acting and villainizing middle class people. They're basically like, it's harmful middle class representation.
What?
That's what it comes down to.
That's
And my response to that is, you are trying to find a depth in this movie that doesn't exist. That's my response to that. So I don't really have strong feelings about the way it's depicting class or what it's trying to say about class disparities. I think what you said is not incorrect. I think parts of Saltburn, especially in the middle, are just boring. That was most of my problem with it. Is there parts of it that are really boring to me, especially once the Barry Keoghan character actually gets there and starts wreaking havoc. And the reason I find so much of it boring is because it is all provocation without any buildup or tension. I think shock value, which is the word that you used, is a good way to describe it. It just feels like really empty shock value, and it's like fake perverted or something. It's trying to be perverted and weird, but it's not actually. There's a scene in Hedda when she's having this big party and everyone is walking through this hedge maze. And I just remembered, oh, that's kind of the big climax of Saltburn, is there's this huge party happening and Jacob Elordi and Barry Keoghan have this confrontation in a hedge maze, and Barry Keoghan kills him, right? So I was like, there's like a lot of similarity just plot-wise and some of the imagery with Saltburn. And I, one, realized this movie is much more interested in saying thoughtful things about class than Saltburn is. And two, this movie is full of tension and simmering and violent eroticism in a way that I find fascinating and really, really compelling to watch. And I felt like none of that existed in Saltburn, but it wanted the payoff of that without actually putting in the work to get there. And so that's where my estimation of Saltburn is so low. And when I said before we started recording that Hedda makes my estimation of Saltburn even lower, that's the kind of thing I'm talking about. And I'm very interested in Emerald Fennell's Wuthering Heights movie that comes out in a few months. And I will be very delighted if it really is genuinely erotic, because I feel like people have sort of propped her up after Saltburn as this like erotic provocateur, and I don't buy it yet, but I'm interested in how she moves forward. But that's a whole other thing.
I mean, that makes total sense if that's your like take on Saltburn. And I think I also am not privy to a lot of conversations around most directors and films. And so oftentimes that isn't playing into my experience of the movies. But I will say, because didn't she do, what was her other film? What was her other film?
First film was
It's Promising Young Woman,
which
right?
I have not watched.
It's so good. It's so good, I think. And people's critiques of that film were, I thought, mostly stupid. They were like, this is like revenge porn or whatever. I think that film is good. I love it. I think it's so great. And so when I saw Saltburn, I already had this more like positive opinion going into it. And I'm sure that impacted my expectations for sure. But I don't think Saltburn is trying to ask the question of, is it bad to be really wealthy and then kind of like dismissive of the middle class? It's like, no, that sucks. And let's have a good time bringing in this middle class interloper, like you said, and like having them ruin their lives. I think that's literally the entire plot. And I think that's literally the entire point. And it's why I have such a great time watching that movie. I don't like to watch movies more than once. I have seen it more than once.
I know you have.
And I like the shock value because it brings in elements of horror, something that I like about like the horror genre. I think the perversion is real. I believe it. But also, I would say it does get boring in parts. But I also got bored when watching Hedda. I guess I didn't mind it. Like Saltburn, I haven't watched it all the way through. And same thing with Hedda. I was like, this is getting kind of boring and long. So I stopped it and I watched the rest of it like the next day. And I do the same thing with Saltburn. And so I had just had very similar watching experiences with both of them. Even though Hedda is investigating class and race and gender in ways that Saltburn is not, it's still like rich people doing things. And that is boring. And it's why I don't like All's Fair. But All's Fair is boring because All's Fair is like bad in a different way.
Well, I would say what Hedda and Saltburn have going for them is that you're watching this person get in this increasingly complicated and messy situation. And so you're watching it wondering, okay, how are they going to get out of this?
Mm-hmm.
And I just find Hedda to be a more interesting character than Barry Keoghan and Saltburn. And I'm able to understand Hedda, like I've said earlier. I think with the Barry Keoghan character, it just comes down to like, this is what she wanted the plot of her movie to be. So she needed this character to do this and behave in this way. So I'm like, oh, he's fucking the grave now of the boy he killed who he was maybe in love with. Okay, like LOL, what? Why is this happening? Other than you're anticipating this is going to be some kid's first R-rated movie and they're going to think it's crazy. Maybe that's condescending. But you're at least in Saltburn and in Hedda, you're just watching mess unfold, knowing that it eventually is going to come to a head. That is just basic plot structure designed to hold your attention. My assumption is that All's Fair is not operating that way.
It is.
Oh, it is.
That's the thing. Like it is. It's like they're getting into these really fucked up situations, especially the Sarah Paulson as the antagonist. She's like really fucking shit up right now. And I'm like, oh shit, how are they gonna get out of this? How is this gonna unravel? It potentially all comes down to class for me. Whereas everybody's rich in that show. Everybody's fucking rich. And in Saltburn and like, yeah, Hedda had this wealth, but she has this added, there are other things happening that we've already talked about, like elements of race and gender, which I guess, sort of exists in All's Fair, but they're not investigating the classism.
At what point in Hedda did you become bored? Just out of curiosity.
Probably most of the first half.
Oh, okay.
I would like start it and then stop and start it and then stop. And like I watched both halves. I honestly just like kind of threw out it. And boredom like isn't a bad like I really liked this movie. This isn't a critique. Me saying that I was bored, it genuinely like isn't a critique of the film. It was just very much like rich people doing things, Hedda being evil. There's more to investigate in Hedda, but I don't know if we're necessarily being asked to investigate it.
I think we are, just because even just the nature of looking beyond the text of the film and who is making this film, the fact that it's a Black woman who is writing and directing, who is directing this movie and readapting it and casting a Black actress in the lead role. You don't need to have that knowledge to watch the movie, but clearly she had something she wanted to, and making it gender swapped so then it's queer.
Yeah.
But even if you didn't have any prior knowledge of the original Henrik Ibsen play, even if you didn't know who Nia DaCosta was, you would still know, oh, they're gay in the 1950s and there's a Black protagonist. I'm just calling her that because she's the main character, Black main character, operating in this predominantly white space in the 1950s. So if you have a basic grasp on sociology by just being a person, I feel like you should know there's things that you're being called upon to consider.
I guess maybe what I mean by that is like I feel like in many ways it's being investigated for us because of the way that it's presented, because we already have this element of queerness presented to us. We have the element of racism presented to us. But I guess in our conversation, like we have investigated it more thoroughly. I don't know. I do think that they were just boring in similar ways.
That's interesting.
But I watch a lot. Listen, I was also bored by Little Women. I started it and finished it another day because I got bored. Because it's just like people doing things. You know, it doesn't mean like I don't like the movie or that I don't think it's great. I just need a break from plots that are very structured. And maybe that's why I gravitate towards indie films where there's a
so if you're
strangeness.
A 3-hour surreal, all vibes, no plot.
I'm more likely to sit through it.
Are you more likely to be locked in for the whole time?
And less bored, yeah.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
To me. As someone who uses I was bored as a form of criticism of a movie or book or something.
Yeah, I don't mean it as a criticism. It's more of just like a fact of my experience with it. And I don't mind boredom.
I think boredom is useful in that it's telling you something about where your head is at, what you would rather be doing, what you desire to be doing.
But sometimes I just like continue being bored. But when I'm bored, they don't even make any move towards. And I don't know. Maybe bored isn't the right. No, bored's definitely the right word. I don't know. It's just how I experience boredom. I just don't mind it.
I mean, that's a much healthier relationship to have with boredom than the one Hedda has.
Yeah, she just causes chaos.
Can we talk about my favorite act of villainy that Hedda has in this movie? That is not in the play whatsoever. So there's this hedge maze, and there's also a lake on Hedda's property, which we have mentioned. And at one point in the party, Hedda's like, let's all go for a swim. And so it's dark. I presume it's cold. I don't know what time of year it is, but it's dark out. And people are getting naked or half naked and getting in the water. And you just see these servants standing there like little soldiers with towels draped on their arms in the background. And it was so funny because I'm like, oh, these people they must see some shit. But they go for a swim. And so when people come back to the party, they're very wet. And Hedda and Eileen have the conversation. And then Eileen says that she wants to go and she needs to join the other professors because they're all congregating in one room, having their nightcaps and cigars and whatever bullshit. And she needs to go talk to them because she's trying to rehabilitate her career. And at this point, Hedda has encouraged her to drink. So she has drank and she's drunk. And Eileen is wearing this dress that has this sort of sheer overlay on the chest. And she's wearing a red coat over her dress. She has the coat on because she's just come in from the cold and the water. And Hedda looks at her chest and then before she leaves to go talk to the men, her male colleagues, Hedda takes Eileen's coat off and it's like, okay, now you're ready to go. And you can see Eileen's nipples through the dress, which you could not see before. And she goes into this room and all these men get these scandalized looks on their faces. And no one comments on it directly, but they can tell that she's drunk and her nipples are just fully visible through her dress. And eventually Hedda's husband, George, takes her aside and talks to her. And he's kind to her in that moment. But when I saw her take the coat off and I could see her nipples, I was like, I don't know why. I was so scandalized by it. Did you notice that?
I love that scene. I'm glad that you brought it up.
I was just like, this is so cunning of Hedda.
Yeah.
To take it to sexualize her in that way or to have her be sexualized in front of these men, and Eileen is too drunk to even realize it's happening.
Yeah, no, I thought about that scene too. It stood out for me as well. And what's interesting about it is that doesn't end up being Eileen's downfall.
Right.
Really. That doesn't end up actually hurting her reputation, because even though you can clearly like see her nipples and she's in this room with all of these men, she is this character is so brilliant. She's able to more or less win at just having basic conversation.
Right.
Her repertoire is, I don't know, she can just like pull out anything from anywhere and combat any kind of like intellectual argument that's thrown her way.
Right.
It ends up being her getting too drunk that really hooks her up.
Because she's drunk, she leaves the manuscript by the water. So Hedda is able to retrieve it and steal it and then act like she doesn't know anything when Eileen realizes that it's missing.
Mm.
But yeah, I was so stunned when you saw her nipples. I was like, oh, fuck. And then I like that you bring up, though, that at first it matters, but then it stops mattering.
Because all the men in the room are like, oh. Because I think, was it Tessman that goes to say something, or the judge?
Yeah.
Somebody was like, almost like, one of the men are like, oh, like, go to tell her. And another man is like, no.
I think Tessman's like, let it be.
Mm.
Because then she starts talking about her new book.
Yeah.
And her new book is she's researching kink and desire and arousal and things like that, like doing the kind of groundbreaking sexual research that was historically being done in that era. And so she just starts talking about it, and all these men are enraptured. She's doing things that they don't have the courage to do, it seems.
Yeah. Well, now thinking back to my comment, which I don't know, we'll just end up taking out, because I think you're right. this film is asking us to investigate things. I do think it's doing quite a bit of the investigation for us, though, through the dialogue, which I don't think is a bad thing. I think it's what makes it compelling, right? Which makes sense considering this was a play. So the dialogue is particularly important and the narrative is really fueled by it. But I want to try and clarify really quick this conversation around boredom, because it's not something I've really investigated myself before. Speaking of investigation.
Okay.
So just because I'm getting bored watching something doesn't necessarily mean I'm not interested in it. There's a difference between bored and I can be like doing something I'm interested in, something that I love doing, and just like feel like I don't feel like doing this right now. This is boring to me. But it doesn't mean it's uninteresting. All's fair is uninteresting to me.
I feel like you're describing getting tired.
It's not tired.
Okay. Because I get what you mean, where you've been doing something and you're like, okay, it's time for me to stop.
Yeah, but not necessarily because I'm tired. Like sometimes I'll be reading a book. I'm like, I'm starting to get bored reading this book. I still think it's interesting. I still
So
really
is it like you're
can't.
losing focus?
Not necessarily.
I just don't think I've ever experienced the exact thing that you're trying to describe.
Yeah, and I don't know how else to describe it, but boredom is an experience of boredom. It's like, this is boring to me right now, but I am interested in it. And that interest will lead me back to it later.
So you just realize you'd rather be doing something else.
Not always, though. I just don't want to be doing that thing.
So then what do you do when you stop doing the thing you no longer want to be doing?
Sometimes I just continue being bored doing the thing that I'm doing. I'm just bored while I'm doing it. Other times, I don't know. Maybe there's like a meditative quality. I just really have to think more about this because I'm also someone who will like hike for like hours by myself, not listening to anything. I'm sure I'm looking around at my surroundings a little bit, but I'm not sure. Anyway, maybe it's not worth keeping any of this in, but I'm often bored by movies that I come on here and talk about how much I like them. And that's the truth.
I feel like this is not, how do I say this? I should preface this by saying this is a me thing. This is not on you. But I feel like me having this knowledge now makes me self-conscious about this entire enterprise. And I'm like, oh, I've dragged her into something that bores her. Do you get where I'm going
Well,
from?
even if that were true, it wouldn't be a bad thing. But I don't feel bored having conversations with you.
No, but now I'm learning I'm making you watch movies that bore you.
Well, some of the movies I pick are boring.
Well, yes. There are very few movies I can think of that don't have a pacing issue or something, you know. I guess I have never thought about the word bored in the way that you are using it. So it's just different.
Yeah. I think that I need to think more about my definition of boredom because I think that's because the way we experience, you can't really know how someone else experiences boredom. I don't know. It's like a thing though with me. It's something that annoys my younger sister. Just like, why are you always bored? I feel like I'm in a perpetual state of boredom. That's like a joke. I'm not actually. But like, I've just always been this way where I'm like, I'm bored. And she's like, but you're doing the thing and you seem really interested in it. And I'm like, I am interested in it.
I think this is what's tripping me up is that in my mind, boredom and interest, they cannot be together at once. And you keep pairing them together. And that's what's breaking my brain a little bit.
Because sometimes I'm doing tasks that I'm really interested in doing and in completing, but I'm bored at the same time.
Well, because there are tasks where I'm doing them and I don't dislike doing them, like house cleaning, for example. it's something that really matters to me that it gets done, because having a clean and tidy space is very important to me. I feel I function best in a space like that. So when I am like, okay, it's time to scrub the kitchen sink and mop the floor, and I'm setting aside the time to do that, I'm not necessarily interested in it while I'm doing it, but I'm not bored either. And sometimes I put on a podcast or music while I do it. Sometimes I just do it in silence. So it's neither interesting nor boring.
What is it then?
It's just me doing what it's labor, but that's more the essence of what it is as opposed to the feeling it evokes. It's anticipatory because I know that once it's done, I'll feel really good.
Yeah.
One of my favorite sensations is I've cleaned my apartment, and then when I go out and I walk my dog, and then I come back in and I come into the front door and I can just see how tidy it is. It's one of my favorite things in the world. So yeah, I don't know what it is. Maybe I'm just not interested in defining what it is, because to me it's just a thing that needs to get done that is worth doing.
That makes sense. Because something that I do say is, boredom like breeds curiosity for sure, but not always. So,
because to me, being able to sit with boredom is important, and to understand what your boredom is trying to tell you. But I also think of boredom as something that you are always working to overcome. Where it's like, okay, you know what? I've watched 3 episodes of this show, and I think it's not that, well, wait, maybe I'm having a breakthrough. Because sometimes you're binge watching a show and you're still interested in the show. You want to continue watching it, but you're like, I've watched 3 episodes and I just feel myself sinking into my couch, and I don't feel as stimulated anymore. It's not fun anymore. It's not relaxing anymore. And that's when I'm like, I should go take a walk, or I should bake something, or do a puzzle, or read. But I don't know if I call that boredom. But it is this realization that I need to shift gears in what I'm doing in order for my brain to feel good. But I think I've also just never been the kind of person who takes a break from watching a movie halfway through and finishes it the next day. I think that's just a personality thing.
Yeah. But it's always because I am bored. I'm like, I'm bored. But the question of like interest is really important to this too. I am just going to have to think more about this, because I think there's like a difference between interest in the external and interest in the like internal. It's not that I'm necessarily like externally uninterested. Maybe I'm still interested in the movie, but I feel like this, like the word investigation is like a buzzword in this episode. I am not interested in investigating the task at hand. And then it becomes boring to me, which makes a lot of sense with the way that I do things. It's actually making me think of Margaret Atwood's The Handmaid's Tale. Not the show, but the book itself, because I've heard multiple people say that, they had a hard time getting through the book because it got boring, because there are so many instances where the protagonist is just like describing her surroundings, right? Because everything is taken from her. She's not given anything to read. She's not given any stimulus to engage in. And Margaret Atwood really brings that boredom to fruition for the reader as well. So you're experiencing it along with the protagonist. And maybe I'm thinking a lot about boredom too, is because, like I said at the beginning, Hedda is bored. That's why she's doing all this. She's filling up her days.
I think that's also why I'm so interested in what you have articulated, because something I love to think about, and I love period drama. I was in middle school devouring Downton Abbey, which has nothing really substantial whatsoever to say about class. It's pure soap opera, rich people in their house, you know. Oh, will I marry my second cousin? She will, and then he'll get run over by a turnip truck.
Oh, okay. Well, now I'm interested.
It was deeply sad because Dan Stevens no longer wanted to be on Downton Abbey, which was his prerogative. I feel like the reason I love the petty drama of a show or book set in the past is because these people had nothing else to entertain themselves. In some cases, they had novels, and they had newspapers and they had gossip columns, but they mostly just relied on their tiny enclaves of the world to be entertained. There was no internet to connect them to things happening all over the world. And I think that's really bizarre to think about, to try to imagine myself in a world like that. My personal nightmare. Because I find it such an invigorating way to be entertained, you know? But they just didn't. They could read serialized Dickens books that were published in the newspaper, and then you had to wait a week for the next chapter. And they went to dinner parties and balls where they talked to the same fucking people all the time, and everyone was just marrying each other or cheating on each other. So I often associate these kinds of texts like Hedda with boredom, but not because they make me bored, but because they are about a world where boredom felt integral in this very specific way.
Yeah. Your description of that is interesting because something I have told my students while we've been in a Gothic novel unit, so they're reading Wuthering Heights, Jane Eyre, these kinds of things. And some of the critique is they're just going on and on with these descriptions. And I'm like, well, yeah, because there was never going to be a film adaptation of this that they were going to look forward to. And also, you wanted it to last a long time because this was your entertainment. You didn't want them to get straight to the point. The suspense was so important. And I really was thinking about this too when I was sick, because I'm like, if I was laying in this bed for 5 days with a fever and I didn't have TV to watch, what the fuck would I do? There's some boredom is fine and I don't have a negative connotation with it. And some boredom, like sometimes I am like, wow, this would be horrible.
I'm wondering, okay, I know we need to wrap up, but I'm just thinking a lot about this boredom conversation. Is it more, do you think, that you are bored or that the thing you are doing is boring?
Well, I think that this comes back to being bored by like whatever's happening externally and then being bored in a more internalized way.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, there's definitely a difference between like, I'm watching these movies. I don't think that they're boring. I'm interested in them, but I'm feeling bored. But it's not always directly related to the task.
Because sometimes I will start something or I'll be like, oh, I want to read, and I'll try to read, and I'm having a harder time focusing than usual. And I think it's not so much that I'm bored or that the text is boring, but I'm just not in the right headspace to be reading a book. So then I find some other task.
That happens to me.
But is that a distinctly different feeling than what you're describing?
But it's different. Okay. Yeah. Like, because I've tried to watch like The Summer I Turned Pretty probably like 5 times. Because so many people, I've seen half of the first episode. Maybe I've seen the whole episode at one point, multiple times.
That was just not what I was expecting to come out of your mouth.
And I find it so, I'm just not interested in it, even though I feel like, but I watched We Were Liars.
Which is, well, I haven't watched We Were Liars, so I can't say if it's a better show. But I have a very soft spot in my heart for The Summer I Turned Pretty.
A lot of people do
on this show. Because yeah, I remember watching that for the first time and being like, okay, I'm familiar with these books. I know what Jenny Han is about. I'll put this on. And that first episode, I was locked in. I was like, oh, okay. I know which brother I'm rooting for. And I was right the whole time. But I could also just see that show not being your thing.
Yeah, I think that it's just not for me. And I've really tried because I know it seems like it would be fun to like be invested in it.
It was fun to be invested in it.
I am honestly so distracted by the fact that her nickname is Belly.
It is.
I'm just genuinely distracted by it.
You gotta get used to it.
You
gotta get over it. This is the nickname that she was given, and she continues to go by it, even though she is now 16. And eventually, in the 3rd season, after she calls off her wedding to the inferior brother, she goes to France, and people start calling her Isabel. Fine, but that's literally the second to last episode of the show. And then Conrad goes to visit her, and he sees that everyone is calling her Isabel, and so he starts calling her Isabel. And then when they're talking in private, he's like, do you want me to call you Isabel now? Because it's obvious that's what these people are referring to you as. And she tells him, no, you can still call me Belly. It's funny.
Belly. When I'm watching something, if I'm like, oh, I kind of get the plot now. So I think
maybe you're just anti-plot.
I've been known to be anti-plot.
Yeah.
So that would actually make sense. Where I'm like, this is interesting and I am interested in it, but it's a plot. So I kind of know where it's going. And it's just a little boring to me. So I'm going to stop watching it. Maybe it is related to that. Yeah, for sure. That would make sense, actually.
But you can watch the Twilight movies every year.
Yeah, I can watch the Twilight movies every year. But I'm not watching them for the plot. I'm watching them for the campiness.
One could argue that the plot of those movies becomes so ridiculous that it morphs into anti-plot.
You could say that for sure. Yeah, actually, because in like Renesmee and that whole situation, that's actually what the fuck is happening. What? This is a decision that she's making for this story. And then it becomes, yeah. And there's a difference between something having like plot and then like camp. I think often they go like hand in hand. I think Saltburn, maybe if it was the film that was, it could have just gone all out camp or like all out like horror or all out porn. And instead it was lukewarm on all those fronts instead of just like going all in. And so I can see that being extreme. I still liked it. But if something's campy enough, I don't mind that it has a plot. I don't know. Anyway.
Okay. Well, thank you for listening. Rate, review, subscribe, turn on post notifications. That way you never miss an episode. We're on Instagram at Girlhood Movie Database. Thank you to Rachel Ann Morris for doing our cover artwork. We'll be back eventually. We're planning to do an episode about Emerald Fennell's Wuthering Heights.
Yeah, because we're going to have a lot to talk about.
Yes.
Whether it's... I'm betting on it being entertaining, if nothing else.
I want to like it. I feel like I'm going to like it. I want to like it.
I feel like I'm going to dislike it, but I'm going to be entertained by it.
I don't know. I think... Well, I've said to you before that I'm not even looking at it as an adaptation of the novel because I have not been given any evidence that it's going to follow it super closely. So I'm going into it thinking about it as its own thing as best I can. But that being said, I still might not like it. I still might think it makes baffling choices.
What is impacting my experience of watching it, and I haven't even watched it yet, is I read an interview about why she made the decision to have Heathcliff played by a white actor. And her reason was that on her copy of Wuthering Heights that she read when she was younger, Jacob Elordi, that right? like Jacob Elordi kind of looks like the picture of Heathcliff on whatever copy of Wuthering Heights she had. And I was like, that's your reason for dismissing something that honestly was driving so much of the fucking narrative.
Right.
Is the element of racism
That's a very
against Heathcliff. That's your
that's a very bad answer.
so
Even if it's the truth.
yeah.
I've been rolling my eyes at the casting decisions of both Jacob Elordi and Margot Robbie from the very beginning because they're both too old, and especially Margot Robbie, because it is supposed to. I mean, if it's a reimagining, maybe they're older in the movie, but based on the book, they're teenage. I mean, they meet as children, and then Kathy gets married when she's a teen, and she's like dead by. Does she even make it to 20? I don't know. Because it's fundamentally a book about teen angst and how making impulsive decisions without guidance can destroy your life. So I was already like, okay. I do believe in the Jacob Elordi agenda, though. I think he's a really good actor. And I want him to be a movie star. I think he can do it, potentially.
You don't think he is already?
I mean... Maybe he is. I don't know. Because I guess it's like definitionally what is a movie star? Because in the 1950s, a movie star was someone who their name on the marquee could sell tickets. That's what made someone a movie star. It had nothing to do with their ability necessarily. And now the theater landscape has changed so much that that's sort of a non-factor. So what is a movie star? I feel like people have undermined him. I certainly wasn't interested in him at first because he was in Euphoria, which I don't watch, and he was in the Kissing Booth movies, which are atrocious. But he has transitioned and made a lot of really interesting choices since then. I thought he was phenomenal in the Guillermo del Toro adaptation of Frankenstein, where he played the monster. Have you watched that yet?
Did
you start it and get bored?
It wasn't even boredom. I actually just really hated it.
Okay.
I hated all of the changes that were made.
It does make a lot of changes.
Like really significant ones. And I almost wish, I wish they didn't even call it Frankenstein. I wish Guillermo del Toro had just been like, this is a monster film. And then we are, as an audience, can see the obvious allusions to Frankenstein. But it feels like such a misnomer to have to call it Frankenstein.
I mean, Victor Frankenstein is one of the main characters in it.
Sure, yeah.
So,
but
I think
his name is just Victor Frankenstein.
Right. So, I feel like he's in enough of the movie to justify it still being called Frankenstein.
Well, it's not the title. I don't necessarily mean the title. To say we're going to call this Frankenstein because it's based on this book, when it makes so many changes, it's almost like if you didn't tell me this is called Frankenstein and you changed Victor Frankenstein's name, I could maybe pull out some allusions. But I think it should just be an entirely different narrative, just like Monster Movie, which I did read an interview because I was like, what the fuck is what? I think part of it is because I literally just read Frankenstein and was expecting there to be more loyalty to the text than there was. And Guillermo del Toro was like, this is about a father and son relationship, and was more or less like, yeah, I was just like, it's not meant to be an adaptation. But I went into it thinking that it was, because it's called Frankenstein and has all the Frankenstein characters. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
But did you think Jacob Elordi was good? That's the main question.
Yeah. I mean, I think he's a good actor. I also think potentially he has already reached this definition of stardom that you described, because, and the reason I think this is just because I'm around teenagers all the time
Are
who
they
loved
obsessed with-
Euphoria.
Okay.
And so they're like, oh, we're going to see Wuthering Heights because Jacob Elordi. Oh, we're going to watch Frankenstein because Jacob Elordi.
So the movie star is not dead after all.
No.
Maybe. Okay.
No. So his name is already drawing them into.
Because I will often see movies based on the talent attached to them, but I feel like that's just not the norm anymore. And studios have pivoted from that, and now it's all about IP.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now we've had multiple false endings to this episode. But the point is, eventually we'll be talking about Emerald Fennell's Wuthering Heights. And there'll be more Jacob Elordi chatter then. Thank you for listening.
Yeah.
It's okay to be bored. Just don't do evil things in your boredom, I guess.
Bye.
Bye.